you so much for watching. Of course, I want you to subscribe, watching and listening. I'm massively glad to have time with you. And here is a fantastic joke for you to groan, because mostly people groan with my jokes. So how does rain, like rain from the sky, how does rain tie its shoe? The rain ties its shoe with a rainbow. Yeah, I know. You're like, oh my gosh, that's so bad. I know. So let's get into our our final episode of this series, Using Your Talents. So we have something really positive to look at. And we've been looking at Joseph and using your talents and abilities. Joseph had a supernatural ability, talent, with dreams. And we saw over the course of this series, how Joseph initially used that talent, not in a very good way, kind of destructive, hurtful to himself. He used it a second time that was more neutral. And in the last episode, we saw that Joseph used that talent in a way that was very beneficial to the people around him. And so, interesting to think about your talents and your abilities. Think about how have you used your talents, whatever gifts that God has given you, how have you used those talents, that gift? And just for a moment, write in the comments, what is your talent or gift? And then I'd like to flip it the other side. What is something you're not good at? And you're like, well, I have a whole list of things. Well, just pick your top one and put that in the comments now. Because I think sometimes the things we're not good at, if we evaluate those things and we look at them in light of what God has given us talents, then we can kind of see how they could play together and how God could participate in our lives and even bring in other people resources. And we can have teamwork and see some cool stuff happen. But when we think about Joseph, I want to finish this series with the end of Joseph's, not his life, but his time in Egypt. And at the end of the book of Genesis, when you come to chapter 42 as well as chapter 50, you know, it's interesting because Egypt had been in 7 years of abundance and plenty, and just according to the dream that Pharaoh had, then it was followed by 7 years of famine. In those 7 years of famine, it says that in chapter 42, verse 6, it says that Joseph's brothers came down to Egypt to buy grain because the famine had spread up into Canaan. And Jacob, their dad, had sent the brothers down. The brothers thought that Joseph had long gone, disappeared, probably died, who knows, because they sold him into slavery. So the brothers come down to Egypt, and it says the brothers bow down to Joseph because they're there. They don't recognize it's Joseph, their brother, but they're bowing down to him to bring him money in exchange for grain. And as Joseph recognizes his brothers, he's like, oh my goodness, I haven't seen them in like 20 years. And they don't recognize him because he looks Egyptian, right? I mean, and he's in charge of everything, all the grain in the whole country. He's a very powerful man. And the brothers are bowing down to him, and it says Joseph remembered the dreams. And the first time he told that whole dream thing, he didn't explain it well. He didn't use that talent well. He used it for his own selfish improvement or whatever, and it backfired. And now it's like this full circle. You have the opportunity, that's the dream that God gave me, and then you think about they're doing it now, and that dream has come to pass in my life. And sometimes you might have dreams or visions that seems to be long in the fulfillment of it. It's a long trail to seeing that come to fruition. And your talents and your abilities, sometimes you can get maybe frustrated. You think, well, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to use that talent because it backfired. It didn't turn out good for me. But all these things, I think, play together. And if you can relate to some of this, hit the like button right now, because I think there's a lot of things in here that you and I can relate to. So hit that like button. But Joseph, he remembers the dream. He remembers, oh, I saw sheaves bowing down to me. Oh, I saw sun, moon, stars bowing down to me. And now my brothers are here actually doing that. And I think it took him a minute to kind of, whoa, you know, these are the dudes who sold me into slavery. These were the dudes that were so unkind and hurtful to me. These are the dudes that caused me to be separated from my dad for the last couple decades. I think he had to kind of process and work through that. Have you ever been hurt? Have you ever been hurt by somebody working against your talents and your abilities? Hit the like button, because I think that's true. For all of us, I think that's true. So what do we do with that? And Joseph, I think it took him a little minute to kind of process, think about it. But over the course of time, and I fast forward it, Joseph, ultimately, he redeems the situation. He's reconciled with his brothers. He tells them, I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into slavery. And I think they lost their teeth at that moment. I think they were like, kind of choked. And then they bring their dad down, and Joseph is reconciled with their dad. And it's interesting because at the end of Genesis, their dad dies, Jacob dies. And the brothers are nervous. They're like, oh my goodness, maybe Joseph is going to take vengeance on us for being so unkind to him. And Joseph, I love what Joseph says. He's like, brothers, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good, to save a multitude of people. And ultimately, our talents and our gifts, our abilities that God has put into us are not just for our personal consumption and benefit. They're for a multitude of people around us. So I just encourage you today, let's make sure that our talents and abilities, that we employ and use those, not just for our own benefit, but to upgrade and enhance and then to improve the people in the world around us. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for listening. And next week we'll start a new episode. And thank you for employing your talents and abilities for the world around you.